Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to be doing a review of this new Lekato Dirty Studio Overdrive Distortion pedal. This thing is super versatile. It's got a lot of different preset modes, so you can get everything from like overdrive to distortion. And it's got other interesting features that aren't available on a lot of distortion pedals. So I'm going to go through some of the cooler sounding settings and compare them to classic distortion pedals. And make sure to stick around to the end because I'll show you the settings that I use to dial in some vintage punk tones as well as like some Nirvana style distortion. But before we begin, remember to like and subscribe. That way you get notified when I post new videos. I post new content like this several times a week. And check out my website, scottobryanguitar.com. I have the tab for hundreds of punk rock and grunge songs up there. And here we go. All right, so before I begin with the demo of the tones, just a little bit about this pedal. It's available on Amazon for $49.99. I'll put a link in the description where you can get it. So this pedal is kind of a combination overdrive distortion pedal, and it has like some settings that are like emulations of kind of classic amps or classic pedals. So we've got a gain knob, which obviously controls the amount of overdrive or distortion. Then next to it, you've got a dial with 9 preset settings, boost, then you've got 4 overdrive settings, and then you've got 4 different distortion settings. Then you've got your standard level control. And then what's also nice about this pedal is you've got a bass, mid, and treble control. So you can actually fine tune your tones a little bit better than like the standard tone knob that would be on a distortion pedal. It's also got your standard AC adapter plug, but you've also got a USB-C power control, which can come in handy in some situations. One downside to the pedal is that there's no connector for a 9-volt battery, so you have to use an external power source. So the first setting I want to talk about is the boost setting, which is a pretty cool setting. A lot of overdrive and distortion pedals don't come with a boost option. So for example, if we start with a clean tone, and then we click the pedal on. Now it's a little bit brighter with all of the bass, mids, and treble settings directly up. But if that's too bright for you, you can dial back the treble and the mids on that. And it adds a little bit of crunch to it, which in my case emulates an overdriven Fender Twin Reverb tube amp, which takes a lot of volume to get to that point. So you can get that kind of classic crunchy rock and roll sound with that, which is a pretty cool option to have with an overdrive distortion pedal. All right, so the next setting I want to talk about is the first overdrive setting. It's the Overdrive TS, which I assume is emulating a Ibanez Tube Screamer pedal. And Lekato actually makes a Tube Screamer style pedal that's a copy of the Ibanez Tube Screamer circuit. So I imagine it's probably the same circuit that's in this pedal. And if we put them back to back, you can hear they sound very similar. So first the Lekato. And then now the Tube Screamer. So back to back is actually a very similar sound. We can even tweak the Legato a little bit with the equalizer settings and dial in exactly the way we want to sound. Another setting I really like on this pedal is the overdrive amp setting. And I believe what this is meant to simulate is just overdriving like just the sound of your amp. So there's not a lot of change in the tone of your guitar through this amp. It almost works like a more gainy boost, but even less impact on your actual tone. So here's my clean tone. And then here's with the pedal on in the amp overdrive setting. And this might be one of my favorite overdrive settings on this pedal, is it just gives you that really cool classic vintage tube amp pushed overdrive sound. So then moving on to the distortion settings in the pedal, the first distortion setting we have is the SC1 setting, and this kind of emulates like a very thick distortion pedal, something like a Boss DS1. It's pretty bright and present, but we can also tweak those settings with the equalizer. So here's that setting. this is kind of like a modern punk to like metal style. And so then for comparison, here's the Boss DS1 pedal. So again, very similar tones out of the Lekato as the Boss DS1 pedal. The Lekato might even give you a little bit more versatility because you've got the bass, mid, and treble adjustments, which gives you a little bit better customization than just a single tone knob. So the last mode I'm going to talk about before I show you my favorite two settings on the Lekato is the MT2 mode. Closest I can come to describing this is it's like a very overdriven sound. You can get like a big muff fuzz type tone, so I'm going to compare it to the big muff on this. You can get really heavy like doom metal style sounds. So here's the Lekato. And now here's the big muff with similar settings. So again, I'm really impressed with what you can get out of the Lekato as far as a variety of tones and really emulating like a good fuzz pedal. All right, so now I'm going to show you the settings for two of my favorite modes on this pedal. The first one is like a vintage punk style sound, like think Ramones or Sex Pistols. And so it's going to be the amp dial on the Lekato, which is the overdrive setting. And I've got the gain cranked. I've got the bass at 12 o'clock. I've got the mids at 3 o'clock, and I've got the trebles at 3 o'clock. And here's what it sounds like. And then the other mode I really like is the distortion mode in the MT2 setting. The settings I have here will give you kind of a modern like grunge punk style sound, like kind of heavy, like almost fuzz distortion. We've got the gain at like 11 o'clock. The bass is at like 2 o'clock. The mids are at like 2, and the treble's also at 2. And here's what that sounds like. All right, so that's it for the review. Overall, I give the Lekato Dirty Studio a 7.5 out of 10. For 50 bucks, it's super versatile. You can get a variety of tones out of it. Everything from natural amp overdrive to a few different vintage overdrive sounds to like heavy distortion and fuzz. I really like the bass, middle, and treble settings so that you can kind of tweak your tone in. What I didn't like is the lack of a 9-volt battery enclosure. I know it's not really a big deal. Everybody pretty much runs power or pedal board these days, but sometimes when I'm playing shows, I'm only running 1 or 2 pedals. I don't want to drag a pedal board, and I want to just pop a 9-volt battery in there. And while it's versatile and can give you a variety of different tones and you can really tweak things in, I feel feel like the emulations just fall a little short of the original pedals. As far as a budget option to get a variety of different tones, this is a great pedal, and I could really see a couple of these settings as part of my setup and something I might use for certain sounds I want to get when recording. But as far as replacing some of the classic pedals that I have on my pedal board already, like the Ibanez Tube Screamer and the Big Muff pedal, it's not going to do that. All right, so that's it for this one. Remember to like and subscribe and check out my website, scottobryanguitar.com. I have the tab for hundreds of punk rock and grunge songs and other resources up there, and I'll see you guys next time.